Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Erin Baker, Director of Solutions Consulting at AlayaCare. Erin is also a PreSales Collective ambassador. The topic of today's episode is how to get promoted. Erin has been at AlayaCare for just a few years, but she's had 4 different roles and 3 different promotions, including a recent one to the Director of Solutions Consulting. And so in today's episode, Erin and I are going to talk about her experience in getting promoted, what she did to raise her hand, to let her goals and aspirations be known to her leaders and managers, creating a plan of action to get there, and then really talk about what the experience has been like. There's so many pre-sales professionals listening to this podcast that are an individual contributor role that want to make the jump to leadership. And so this episode explains what that process was, what that experience has been like, and some of the things that were expected and unexpected in the role. I hope today's episode gives you some actionable takeaways, no matter where you are in your career journey, on things that you can do to raise your hand to get that next step. Enjoy.
Pre-sales activities are scattered across tools, consuming a lot of work time and creative energy. Meet Prescale, an all-in-one pre-sales intelligence platform that helps you to streamline evaluation experiences, deliver impactful solutions, and improve technical conversions. With a unified workspace, Prescale enables teams to identify and engage with best fit prospects, document niche product interactions, and accelerate product conviction to drive sales conversions. Learn more at prescale.com.
Erin, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good to see you, James. And we missed you last week in person in Toronto.
I am gutted. For us, we were like, hey, let's do this podcast after the Toronto event so we could have met in person and then do the podcast. And unfortunately, I didn't make Toronto. So while my notes say, great to finally meet you in Toronto, it looks like we're going to have to schedule something again in the future.
I think so. Zoom is a close second, but nothing compares to being in person.
So you have been involved in the PreSales Collective really since the beginning. And when we had a Canada chapter and we're doing some virtual events, you were leading some of those. Now you're part of the ambassador program and you're giving back to the community by showing up to the in-person events. So what was that experience like finally meeting folks that you've built relationships with virtually in person?
I remember the first time that we connected was probably a year and a half ago. You were just starting, maybe 2 years ago. Time flies with the pandemic, but you were just starting out the PreSales Collective. And I know I had reached out because I was looking to also form a community within Canada. It was amazing. I mean, PreSales Collective through the pandemic, being able to have those virtual events, get to know other individuals within Toronto and Canada as a whole, and collaborate on all things pre-sales was such a great resource for us to have. But really getting in person and having spent a year of virtual meetings, and obviously the Zoom fatigue hit in at a certain point, but just getting to see people in person and recognizing familiar faces, but seeing them right in front of you and getting to connect was amazing.
I appreciate all your involvement and engagement. I think for me, being on the Spring World Tours, being able to see and feel the impact of the community, right? Like all the relationships people have built with each other, new jobs, advice on how to get promoted, which we'll talk about today, but all those learnings that have happened virtually. And then it's kind of like the magic comes together in person. That's been my favorite thing to see. So we will get working on another event for Toronto so that we can finally meet in person.
Sounds good. I'll be there.
So Erin, before we get into today's topic of how to get promoted, let's talk about you and your career journey. What got you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I, from an education standpoint, started out in a health sciences program. So despite a lot of people in pre-sales where they come from engineering or comp sci backgrounds, at least from a lot of the connections that I've established, I actually come from a health science background and then did a 1-year business master's program. So for me, I was always super passionate about the healthcare industry, but wanted to find that way to bring technology or software into the healthcare space and really bring in that innovation that there was a huge lack of for a very long time. So I ended up at the company that I'm at now, AlayaCare, after doing about a year at a previous startup in a similar space. And funny enough, I actually started out in the client services team, or client success as some may know it. So even from conversations I've had with other pre-sales folks, a lot, it seems, go directly into a pre-sales role. Whereas for myself, at AlayaCare at least, it's sort of the natural progression to start out in client success, understand the intricacies of our product and the technical background, and then move over into a pre-sales role. It's not for everyone, for sure. I think I have always had the urge to move into more of a sales-oriented position, but definitely having started out in client services, it set me up for success with certain skills that I could bring over to my new role.
That's so well said, and I appreciate you sharing that. As someone who also comes from the post-sales side of things, before making the pre-sales, I think it's really allowed me to bridge that gap between the onboarding and implementation experience and the actual selling experience, and I think made me a better pre-sales professional. So I love hearing you say the same.
Definitely. I think the key takeaway that I had from client services, I'm curious to hear if you experienced this too, but needing to solution not as much on the fly as we see in the sales role or pre-sales role, but solutioning, thinking outside the box, having complex client challenges and never giving up, trying to find what's that optimal workflow that we can give them or optimal solution.
I like your perspective there, and I definitely can agree. And when I reflected back on my own experience, my first company, Revenate, we didn't have a sales engineering team beginning, so I was on post-sale, but I would do a bunch of pre-sales work. And I realized, though, in pre-sales, I could talk about what we were going to do, but once you're actually on the implementation and onboarding team, you have to actually do those types of things. And I think to your point, learned a lot more roadblocks that would actually happen in getting from A to B than I would have thought in the sales process.
Definitely. Can relate as well.
I know a couple people who work on the post-sales side of things can relate to us on that. But I want to talk about this because today's episode, How to Get Promoted, your career journey at AlayaCare has been inspirational. So you've had 4 roles over there, I guess promoted upwards of 3 times, starting in client success and client success manager, pre-sales, and now the director of that sales engineering team. What is your secret?
I don't know that there's necessarily a secret. I think at the end of the day, you need to work hard. Always give 110%, regardless of what role you're playing within the company. So when I think about my time over on the implementation side, did I look at that as where I wanted my career to progress and the end goal? For me, that wasn't where I saw my career progressing. And so there was times where the tasks or day-to-day I didn't love, but still going in every day, giving that 110%, no matter what you're doing, was important for me. And I think moving from client services or client success over to SE isn't necessarily a promotion. It could be at certain companies, but for us, it was more of that lateral move. And I think showing that hard work and dedication that I put in is part of the reason that got me into pre-sales and ultimately to this director role now. I think the other areas that are important, and I'll probably bring this up a couple times as we talk today, but always being open and communicating what you want and where you want to get to. I've found, at least through my career, if you don't speak up, you're not going to get what you want. So being super vocal, not just to your direct manager, but build those connections within the company, whether it's co-founders, other managers, departments, let it be known what you want and what you need, and ask them, like, what do I need in order to get into this department or this long-term goal of mine? So those would be 2 key ones. I think maybe one more that I'll just touch upon is always needing to be a team player. And what I mean by that is not just a team player within your immediate team, but looking at the company as a whole. So I've spent a lot of time expanding my network within the company, interdepartmentally, having coffee chats, build strong relationships with people across the company, and really just be curious and get to know other folks within your company. One thing I know that when I originally reached out to you about 1.5 years ago, it was because my colleague Kayla and I were thinking, we want to implement the PSC WISE program at AlayaCare. And for us, we had entered the sales team in the pre-sales role, and there was probably, I'm just throwing a number out there, but let's call it 5-10% of the team was women. And so we really wanted this as an opportunity to let others know that there are positions in sales, specifically pre-sales, and encourage other women to join. So we kind of tweaked off that and built Alaya Women Group that essentially is quite similar. But again, another opportunity, not my direct core work that I'm doing, but I have created other ways to get involved within the company.
One, congratulations on your promotion to director. Your hard work has paid off. It's awesome to see and have really a front row seat. As you said, over the last 1.5, 2 years, there's something that really resonates with me in you saying that just putting your head down and doing hard work and vocalizing, because that was what I was going to ask you about. Because I do feel like for a long time, there was a mantra out there of like, just put your head down and work as hard as you can, and your managers and leaders will see that. And I absolutely agree with that mentality. But I think what I've realized over the past 5 years, 10 years of my career, you have to raise your hand and be vocal about what you actually want. Because at the end of the day, your manager has your best interests in mind, but they also might be managing 3 to 10 to 15 other people. They might not always have what is best for you on the top of their mind because they've got so many other things going on. So it is so important for us to try to control our own destiny. So I would love to learn a little bit more on your thoughts, right, about how vocal you actually are when it comes to those opportunities, not just with your manager, but people, as you mentioned, outside of your role that you're building connections with. Did you come up with like a real detailed plan of action per se with your manager to make sure that you were working against those outcomes?
So I think I tend to be more on the vocal side, as I've mentioned already. I always take my one-on-ones as an opportunity to constantly remind my manager of where I want to get to. So you can say it once, but as you mentioned, a manager or leader is oftentimes managing multiple people. So keeping that top of mind for them is important. You need to keep reminding them, have that open communication. I know for myself, and this can be challenging for certain people for sure, but being receptive to critical feedback. Some people get very defensive and it's tough to hear. For myself, I just try and always stay open-minded to their perspective and where they feel I can continue to improve. But the key here is not just listening to what they have to say, but okay, what's the action plan from here? So you've told me that I need to demonstrate more leadership. This was earlier on. Okay, how can I do that? Let's build a plan. What does that look like over the next 6 months? And I would like to receive feedback month over month on how I'm progressing towards demonstrating that. And so a perfect example for me is I was asking probably a year and a half ago, I'd like to see more leadership opportunities, specifically getting some management experience. And so my manager heard me, he worked with me, and we ended up getting an intern for the summer. So that was sort of the perfect way to begin testing out my skills, onboard someone, coach them, manage them throughout the summer, and start building some of those skill sets that you need to be in a leadership role.
I'm really happy you brought that example up, because in my mind, I was going to ask you, like, did your manager give you opportunities to kind of experience the role without necessarily being in it? And it sounds like you had more than a few opportunities to do that. And do you think that really played a role in your preparation for your promotion and really giving your leadership team faith and validation that, yes, Erin can do the job?
I think for me, I more so needed that opportunity to validate for myself that I was ready for it. I don't know necessarily that it would have instilled faith in my colleagues at that point in time that I could move into this leadership role. But I think over time, our team has the utmost respect for one another. And I genuinely believe like it was a bit of a transition moving from individual contributor to essentially leading my peers once I transitioned. And I think having established such a great team culture and having really strong relationships with my peers, that helped to transition to the role. I think the other thing that I have done over the years is looked at my managers that I've had in the past. And I always take note of what do I want one day when I'm a leader? What characteristics do I love about their leadership? And what are things that I absolutely don't ever want in terms of being a leader? And so being mindful of all that, and also as a leader now, taking that in and trying to actually action those opinions that I had of my previous managers. For instance, a previous manager constantly canceling our one-on-ones. If that's your one opportunity to get that face-to-face time, really trying to make the time, carve it out of your week to give your team the time that they need with you.
I love that you bring up tactical examples. I always had a saying that you learned a lot more from a bad experience than a good one. And that sometimes relates to some managers. Shout out to some atrocious managers that I had in my career that have helped me understand how I want to approach this role. Because you're right, those things that positives and negatives. I think the best leaders understand like what has worked and what has not worked from other experiences, and they mold it into their own style. And like you just said, you were promoted to manage that team that you were once on. And I actually think this is the hardest job for any first-time frontline manager. You go from being a peer on the team to being those people's managers. And I think it's tough. So I have to ask, was this role something that you raised your hand for, or were you asked to move into this role?
I was asked to move into this role. My previous manager of the team actually transitioned internally to leading a new team. So that's what opened up the spot for me. I think at the time, at least I've heard at the time, they were considering looking externally for someone with multiple years of experience in an SE role. As you know, I mean, I've been in this role for 3 to 4 years now. So I'm still like, in the grand scheme of things, fairly new in pre-sales compared to those that have 15, 20 years of experience. But I do go back to, I think, always putting in 110%, no matter what you're doing, working hard. I genuinely believe that's got me to where I am today, regardless from day one in client services to getting this promotion to the director role. And part of that is, I think, due to being more of a problem finder as well. So in the pre-sales role, you've got your scheduled demos for the week, but how you use the time in between those demos really can make a difference to the company, to your team. And so I'm the type of person, I go out, I find the problems, and I create those opportunities versus having an issue and trying to solve it after the fact. I think both of those played into getting recognized and getting this opportunity to move into a leadership role. And then in hindsight, I think for me, or for anyone, when you're going to apply for a leadership role and the company is looking at external hires and also yourself internally, I think ask yourself, what are you bringing to the table that external hire doesn't have? So despite me not having 10 years of experience, I know this product in and out. I know how our company operates, and I've established a team culture that's, in my mind, like no other. So all of those are definitely things that should be played up when you're in that type of situation.
I agree. Your leadership, sales leadership, has seen you firsthand. They know what you're capable of. They know the impact that you've made. And I like that you talked about being a problem solver, going out and kind of doing above and beyond. I think that in my experience, when I reflect back on being a leader, I had some employees that were amazing at their job, but they kind of always just stayed in their lane of the sales engineering role. But as we were in, startups or scale ups, doing all those extra things can make a really big impact. And watching people, like yourself, raise their hand, it really makes a dramatic difference. And actually, I've become more validated on this perspective because I recently read Impact Players by Liz Wiseman. She's the one who wrote Radical Candor. It's her follow-up book. And it talks about like what is the difference of those people that have that next level. There's like good employees, but there's impact players. And it's a lot of like just what you mentioning of like going out and doing more and doing extra and proving yourself. And I think for you, you should be very proud knowing that your leadership wanted somebody with 2 to 3 times your experience, quote unquote, and you still got the job, right? That just shows the value that you bring to the organization and the impact. And so maybe a loaded question here is, you're a couple months in now, how's it going?
I'm not going to lie. When I first found out I was getting this promotion, I was obviously thrilled, but like on a more personal level, like one of the personal battles I was dealing with was, okay, how do I move from being that individual contributor to now leading my peers? That was quite hard for me. And I think I internalized that more than I really needed to, because at the end of the day, these people I were working with, they had my back, they respected me. They were excited for my career progression. And really, at the end of the day, not a lot has changed, at least for those people that have been a part of our core team for so long, because we still have that same relationship. I think as I've continued moving into this role and I've been hiring new employees, that's where I'm really getting to take on a lot of that leadership and coaching opportunity for people that are newer to the role or new to the industry and company. So for sure. I mean, it was a transition, and I think it comes with time, and I'm still working into it in some ways. But establishing that really strong team culture has made such an impact in making it a positive transition for me.
Kudos to you for being trusted to, build that culture and build that rapport with those folks. And it just goes to show, I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years and seen your impact and your communication style and what you do. So I have no doubt that that's translating really well to frontline leadership, but it's a transition, like you mentioned, and it always is. And so, what I'm curious about is what is the most challenging part in the current role or, through your promotion?
I think when I got the promotion, so I mentioned that my manager moved internally within the company. We've always been a small team at AlayaCare. I actually don't know on the grand scheme of things, like where we fit. I would imagine on the small side. But anyways, we were 5 individuals on this pre-sales team. So I like to think of it as our startup within the startup. As I mentioned, my manager left, moved to another team, as did another colleague. She actually took on an AESE type role. So kudos to her. Definitely a new challenge as well on her end. But we went from being this core team to now we've lost 50% of the team. So one of the challenging parts for me was, how do I keep the same team culture that we've worked so hard on establishing while needing to bring in new employees and help integrate them into the team and keep what we had previously established. So some ways that I have found that's really worked for us is, especially through COVID, we're all working remote, but we also span across Canada. So it's not a quick trip from Toronto to Montreal or Toronto to Calgary. So I really try and make the time to do team retreats, have that space outside of the day-to-day work to really build strong relationships so they can get to know me and we can also get to know each other. So that's definitely helped in the transition. But yeah, I would just say hiring was new for me. Figuring out how to hire right people, how to vet out a good pre-sales person, and then keeping that culture that we once had, which so far so good.
That's awesome. I appreciate you breaking that down. You mentioned a lot of things there, and it's got me thinking to like when I got promoted to leadership in my own career journey. Is there something that you're responsible for that you didn't anticipate would be such a big part of your job or carry so much weight that you're currently doing now?
One thing that definitely comes to mind is the volume of internal meetings. I don't know if you can relate to that, but I went from lots of demos, so a very high volume of demos, probably 10 to 15 per week, down to I still do a couple demos here and there, but essentially switching those 15 prospect-facing demos to 15 internal meetings, whether it's one-on-ones, meeting with my CRO, leadership meetings, and it's just an insane volume of internal meetings. So I did not anticipate this.
I love that you said that. Someone else who used to work for me, who recently went through a similar promotion, he used to sometimes say, like, I don't know what James is doing. Like, what is James doing? And he told me he got promoted to leadership. And he said, I understand how many meetings you're in all the time. I think nobody ever expects it. There's so much collaboration. I think that's the blessing and the curse, right, of the pre-sales role, is that you connected to so many teams. And so it just amplifies the number of internal meetings. I don't know about you, but I will say I have really made a focal effort in the past 2 years, like with the pandemic, to be like, if I don't need to be problem solving in a meeting, let's take it to Slack, let's take it to email. So those extra meetings add up, and then you still have to do your regular job. It's tough to find the pockets, right?
Definitely. I completely agree. Way too many meetings with the pandemic for sure.
So what's your favorite part about the role so far?
I would say getting to see new team members grow in the pre-sales role. I find that, and actually when I was moving into the leadership role, this is kind of funny. My CRO said, being a leader isn't as fun as it seems. Like there's a lot of things that you just don't understand yet, and you'll soon learn to understand. And he asked me, he said, why do you want to be a leader? And for me, I think it's in the pre-sales role, when you're working those deals and you close a deal, the satisfaction that you get from closing that deal and the reward that you feel in that point in time is just, it's a great feeling to have. But I think moving over to this, it's more feeling that reward of seeing your team grow and progress in the role and ultimately be successful. So actually this week, one of the newer pre-sales folks on my team, she closed her first deal. And the excitement that I felt for her honestly beat the excitement that I would have had closing that deal itself. So definitely that aspect, like really just coaching and encouraging and growing the team. I think the other part that I really like is previously, I don't think our team necessarily focused enough on our own learning and development. So a lot of the week was just demo. And I've really started to carve out time for the team so that as a collective group, we can continue learning. And actually, pre-sales has been a great resource for us. I know we've gone through various videos and resources posted on the website to build into our own learnings, looking at things like competitive intel, storytelling techniques, demo backs. I don't know if this is just a thing that we do on our team, but we'll pick like a little part of our product and we all demo back and give one thing we'd keep, one thing to take away, just to continue to refine our skills. So I really, really do love that aspect of it and just continuing to build that team culture and collaboration as well.
Fantastic answer, Erin. And I'm super happy that PreSales Collective can help play a role in learning and development of your team, but you've got the right mentality and the right approach. I think the best leaders understand how to get the most out of their employees and help maximize their impact and help them hit their potential. And it's that reward and that feeling that you get inside when you see their success is what this is all about. Like even with PreSales Collective, this is why this community exists, is to give back and help and play our role in that because this profession is so collaborative. So I like that you talked about that and love that you're creating a culture of learning. I have a fundamental philosophy that the world is moving around us. No matter how long we've been in a role or a job, we always have areas of growth because if everything else is moving around us, we need to move with it. Erin, this has been awesome hearing your journey, how you got promoted and what that experience has been like, because I think it's really important for folks to hear, right? It is important for folks to hear and understand how they can essentially take some of your learnings and apply them to their own career. And so I always like to end with an advice question. Again, this is a fairly broad question. What advice do you have for people who want to take a next step in their career?
Well, first and foremost, I've said this a couple times already today, but always giving that 110%, work hard, be transparent on your short and long-term goals. I mentioned not only being transparent to your manager, but speak with others in the company. Let it be known to anyone and everyone where you want to get to. Definitely be curious. That's something that we look for in all of the SEs joining our team as well. But be curious not only in your role, but with other people internally and externally at the company. So really explore all opportunities. If you want to get into pre-sales and you're not here yet, speak with multiple people, understand like what does the day-to-day look like? What's the career progression or where can I see myself 5-10 years out? And lastly, be a problem finder. If you've got extra time in the day in between demos or in between whatever your job might be today, where can you be doing better and where can the company be doing better? And don't just come with the problems, but come with the solutions to those problems.
Mic drop, Erin Baker. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. I appreciate all that you do for PreSales Collective and the pre-sales profession. And I look forward to finally meeting you in person in Toronto. We'll see you around the community. All right?
Absolutely.
All right, PreSales Collective. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It's great talking to Erin. It's been really wonderful getting to know her over the past, 1.5, 2 years with the PreSales Collective. For me, when I was thinking about episodes, I thought bringing Erin on to talk about her promotion would be something that would resonate with the community. We brought folks on that were on a solutions consulting team that have been promoted to the director of that specific team. And what we want to do is highlight that that is a path for pre-sales professionals and really how that path came to life. What were things that those people did to put themselves in a place for promotion? I mean, you heard Erin say that her CRO wanted somebody with 10 plus years experience from the outside. She still got the job because they know the impact that she can have on the organization based off her knowledge of being and growing within the company. Erin mentioned giving 100, 110% at all that we do. And I think it's really important, especially as we are hired for a job. We have a job description. These are things that we're supposed to be doing. But I believe that it's those things that we're not supposed to be doing, or the things that we're not told to do, are the things that allow us to build our own internal brand. They allow us to be known for something as well. And so when you're starting to compare, well, maybe James is really, really great at the job, but really hasn't gone above and beyond in some of these other things that the business needs, and comparing it to maybe Erin, an example, who is really good at the job but has done A, B, C, and D in preparation for this role. I think that makes a big impact. And hearing how the experience is actually going and what it's actually like to be a frontline manager is really important. And so I hope you found value in today's episode, or if you're a leader and this podcast would resonate with a future leader of yours, just share it with them. And if you have a similar story or want to share your promotion story, please reach out to me on the PreSales Collective Slack. I'd love to talk about it and figure out how we can get you contributing back to the global pre-sales community. All right, PreSales Collective, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please like and share the podcast. It goes a long way in giving us that review. And as always, we will see you next week.